All right, listeners, I think you know that we are part of the Radiotopia network, which is basically a network built on the idea that you should support the most creative, independent audio makers around. No one, and I mean no one, embodies the Radiotopia ethos more than Benjamin Walker and his show Theory of Everything. Benjamin, who I've known for a long time, has been making beautiful, personal, sprawling audio documentaries for decades that help us understand the very strange world we live in. And now he has a new series called Not All Propaganda is Art. The new series goes back to the 1950s, when Western security agencies like the CIA paid artists, writers, and intellectuals to fight the cultural Cold War.
The CIA funds were free. I mean, no one was told what to say.
Gloria Steinem, activist who sees the CIA as a sort of enlightened pal or rich uncle, there is another viewpoint.
Look, if you're listening to this show, I know you like secret histories. I know you like a mix of culture and politics and shadowy figures. So what are you waiting for? Not All Propaganda is Art from Benjamin Walker. You can find it now wherever you listen or at theoryofeverythingpodcast.com. This episode is brought to you by Progressive. Progressive helps you compare direct auto rates from a variety of companies so you can find a great one, even if it's not with them. Quote today at progressive.com to find a rate that works with your budget. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates. Comparison rates not available in all states or situations. Hello and welcome to This Day in Esoteric Political History from Radiotopia. My name is Jody Avirgan. This day, January 18th, 1980, the price of silver hit a record high on the world market, $49.45. This was an increase of over 713% from the price just a year or so earlier. Incredible rise in the price of silver, and an intentional one, because this peak in the price of silver was part of a concerted campaign over a couple years by a group of Texas billionaires to essentially corner the world's silver market. We'll get into this group, this family really at the heart of all of this, but this was a scheme by a set of brothers, Nelson Bunker Hunt, William Herbert Hunt, and Lamar Hunt. They were the sons of H.L. Hunt, oil tycoon, conservative thinker, very paranoid thinker. The Hunt clan keeps popping up over and over as you tell the story of business and conservative politics throughout the 20th century. Anyway, this attempt to corner the silver market would culminate a couple months later in what is known as Silver Thursday, when, shocker, things started to crash. The group's complicated financial scheme did not work out. They were on the brink of losing billions. Others had to step in and bail them out. The world markets freaked out. One of the worst financial panics in years. A lot of this sounds pretty familiar, folks who lived through maybe 2008 and other panics and crashes and so forth, and complicated financial schemes. Anyway, this whole Silver Thursday saga is the subject of a new 4-part series from the excellent history podcast Eclipsed. It is hosted by Bijan Stephen, who is here to discuss the silver scheme of 1980 and the very powerful and shady characters involved. Bijan, welcome to the show.
Hello, thanks for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
And of course, Nicole Hemmer of Columbia and Kellie Carter-Jackson are here as well. Hello.
Hello, Jody.
Hey there.
One quick question, just in listening to your series and looking at this story, I've heard that phrase corner the market so many times, and I don't think I really fully had my head around it until I heard this story, because it just sounded like, some financial, but like when you talk about cornering the market, you're literally saying we're going to own everything. And in this case, this was an attempt to own all the silver in the world, right? That's what it means to corner the market.
Yeah, it's hard to understand what corner the market means because it's nonsense. Like, why would you, I understand why you would do it, but getting there seems like it requires a lot of time and money. And, this saga, like, is fascinating for many reasons, that being just one of them.
Right. But it's literally, there's all this, I just think it's like, when you think of corner the market with a good or a service or whatever, it's like, okay, we're going to have dominance but this is this is a tangible thing that comes out of the earth. And they literally, the plan here on the part of these folks, we'll talk about who these folks are, was to just collect all of it.
Yes. It's actually extremely funny because this is the second of their schemes to corner a market. The first was soybeans, and we had to leave that out of the story because it was just like getting way too complicated. And they got fined. It looks like $500,000 back in 1970, 1980 for trying to corner the soybean market, and it does really set up the Silver Thursday thing, I think, pretty well, because like clearly they had this idea that they really wanted some security. What's the best way to have security? Well, if you own all of one thing, be it soybeans or silver, you're the guy, right? In any case, Silver Thursday, incredible scheme. It's one of those things that should be a movie, and also like the characters in it, ooh baby, aren't they so good? Like the hunts are so weird. Like there's that scene, I think in episode 2, where Jareki's getting picked up by the hunts in their jalopy, and he describes their house as modest on a lot of land, and then like one of them just goes to sleep on the couch while they're working out, the other one's working out business deals. It's just, now that we, this story's coming out this month, the rest of this month, but now that I'm personally, my part is done in this, I can appreciate it for the cartoon that it is. Like truly, like what was going on?
So let's talk about the hunts.
Yeah.
Yes, let's talk about the hunts.
Niki, you've encountered them in your work.
Yes.
Yes, I first encountered H.L. Hunt when I was writing my first book about the history of conservative media. And he was this Texas oil baron who was very committed to the conspiracy that the communists had infiltrated the United States and were trying to bring down American democracy and American capitalism. And so he pours so much of his fortune into all of these different enterprises to support conservative media and conservative organizations and groups like the John Birch Society. And his idea was, I should use this money in order to turn the United States into a more rigidly anti-communist conservative country.
Yeah, he was a guy who was really into conservatism, and we I think we have a quote from him in episode 1 where he's just like he was really returned to traditional America kind of guy, except this is as we all know, that sort of fiction. It was constructed in the 50s. We can turn back the clock, is what he said.
I was gonna say, I know you've mentioned this is like a movie, but like to me, this is TV. This is Succession. Yeah. This is Yellowstone. This is so many TV shows in which you have children who are vying for daddy's approval and affection, and trying to maintain the family empire. I mean, this is Empire.
Yeah, yeah. We were internally describing it as Texas Succession. But
I admire your restraint and not actually drawing that connection in the piece itself, because it really is this sort of parent-kid dynamic, and the son's just trying to impress their successful father.
It was all about daddy issues, the whole thing. Because, their father thought they weren't really, up to the task. They weren't up to snuff. He moved their desks further away when they started failing in business. It was like there's a whole thing. There's a whole psychodrama here. And also, I mean, on top of that, they were adults when they found out their father had just 2 other families that he just didn't talk about. Like he just in one he went to Florida for business and just married a different woman, and that was one of the families, and they all sort of found out about this at the same time. I mean, before the internet, man, stuff was wild. You could really just do things like that.
And we should say that, so you have H.L. Hunt. He's this billionaire with this huge fortune, and as Bijan was just describing, all of these families. And he has these sons from his first family who are competing for his affection and trying to prove to him that they too are not just wealthy men, but that they can be self-made men, even though they come from this billionaire family. And so part of the scheme is to show daddy that, yes, I too can make myself a billionaire, especially when he doesn't give them his estate after he dies, and they kind of want the money then too.
Right, because that was the big thing. H.L. Hunt's will was fascinating because he doled out his properties, his businesses, whatever. And there were many of them because this guy, nothing was centralized. This guy was all over the place. But it was fascinating because there was a clause in the will that said if anyone disagreed with it, they'd be disinherited. So everyone had to go along with his wishes no matter what, because otherwise you wouldn't get a piece of the pie. And it's it's kind of fascinating because the psychodrama didn't end with his death. And it's I don't think it's a surprise that shortly thereafter, Bunker and Herbert go and try and corner the silver market. They look for a new dad in the Saudi royal family who can help them buy all the silver in the world.
Because they initially go into oil, and then oil starts to not work out for them for a number of reasons.
One of them being Colonel Gaddafi taking Bunker's oil field
in Libya. Yes,
in Libya, because he wouldn't pay him, graft or whatever.
So is there anything beyond just we feel like we can corner this market that they decided to look to silver in particular at this moment?
Yeah, so there was apparently they read this pop psychology book that said that silver was undervalued relative to like things like gold because I think the theory goes it was both like it's a thing that you can have, it's a store of value because it's pretty, whatever, and we make jewelry out of it, but it's also an industrial thing, right? So this like these two things sort of combined, and they were like, well, we think the price of silver should be higher and that more people should pay more for it, and it's also relatively undervalued, and also we have literally the most money in the world, so why don't we look to silver? Why don't we try buying this? And they got in real deep, really deep. And also the other thing to understand about this saga is like, sure, we open with like cowboys loading bars of silver onto 747s bound for Zurich, but the silver that they had wasn't all hard silver. It wasn't all like the metal. They were also trading in silver futures, which are not coincidentally harder to track and harder to regulate. And they were and a futures contract is a somewhat complicated concept, but basically you say, I am going to buy a contract to sell or buy this thing at this date at this price, and you can do funny derivative stuff with them, and it's a whole thing. And we explained it in the show better than that. Yeah. But like they were really, and they were buying silver futures, and they were also doing this on margin, which is like another financial concept that's like that. This in the reporting and the writing, this was one of the harder things to do, is explain these two specific financial concepts. But a margin is like, you buy something with money you don't have, but it's not like a loan, but it increases your buying power basically. And so they were buying silver futures on margin. And one of the big things that led up to Silver Thursday was this thing called a margin call. And this is the third thing you have to understand. A margin call is like a creditor checking up that you actually have the money that you say you have and that you said you had when you bought the thing on margin. And so in the lead up to Silver Thursday, one of the big things was that a bank was like, hey, what's up? And they were like, oh yeah, we don't have that. And, and this becomes a problem depending on how much money you have invested into your scheme. Anyway, I won't spoil any of those details, but oh boy, does the series get real good at the end.
Well, I should say, though, as soon as you said in the series the phrase on margin, my historian hackles went up because this is what people were doing right before the Great Depression in the 1920s. Mm-hmm. Ordinary people were buying stocks on margin. And it makes sense if you believe that the price is going to increase forever because you don't have to have the money. You just have to sell it at the higher price and you reap the profit. And the underlying cost you can just pay off because you've sold the product, right? You've made money, you've been able to pay it back and cover your costs. But if the price drops, you're in really big trouble because you don't have the money to cover the spread. And that happens to millions of ordinary Americans during the Great Depression and to hundreds, if not thousands, of capitalists who are also in the market in this kind of leveraged position. And, as long as the price of silver is going up 713%, you're great. Yeah. But if that price falls, you've lost your shirt.
We did have a very funny quote from Bunker himself, actually. He was on a television show where he said ordinary people shouldn't buy things on margin.
He's correct. Don't do it.
Yeah.
He's correct.
Yeah.
It's funny because like the other thing, this, and to digress into today, you can do this on like Robinhood. You can buy stocks on margin right now. You can buy crypto on margin right now. Do not do that. Don't gamble like with that much, because it's like you're not only gambling with money you don't have, you're gambling with money that you will not receive in the. It's like, if it goes wrong, it goes very, very wrong, very, very quickly. And you don't want to be in the hole to a bank. Like, oof.
It's just incredible to me because they have about $4.5 billion worth of silver, which is just insane. I feel like there's existential questions about like how much is enough? Like how much? Because it's not like these were, started from the bottom, like poor, and now we're trying to accumulate something for our family.
But Kellie, that third billion, it just hits.
Nothing feels like that third billion.
And this is why the story is explicitly psychological. It's about their emotional motivations. Yeah. And I kept asking people, I was like, so what did you think they were thinking? Like, what were they feeling? And it was like, I mean, it really is just daddy issues. Like, straight up, that's the whole story.
But that said, right, we have this daddy issue driven thing. We have billionaires who have 2 billion trying to make their 3rd billion. We have this extremely complicated financial instruments and happening on this sort of, very obscure, hidden world of financial markets. But there were real world effects here. And I want to sort of talk a little bit about that. So both on the way up and on the way down. On the way up, as silver prices are going through the roof, regular Americans, no surprise, say, wait a minute. Is there any silver lying around? I mean, describe a little bit of what happens.
Yeah. So, I mean, like the silver price hits like something like $20 an ounce. Inflation is also, this is the other thing, another parallel today. Inflation was out of control in the early 80s. Like people were like, we had one person we interviewed was like, I was a young bride at the time and I didn't know how much groceries were going to cost the next week because the price would just fluctuate. And that's a really hard psychological position to be in. And, it's also no surprise that people turn to precious metals when the real economy, the one you feel is sort of in free fall. And so, like the price is going up. People are like, wait a second, grandma's silver is worth $20 an ounce. Like we have a tea set. Let's get this money. Like, let's get these groceries. And so they start pulling silver out the supply actually just magically sort of increases because all these people start selling their silver because the price is going up. And this is a thing that's happening all across America. Yeah. And on the way down, it's like...
Right. So let's talk about the way down as we start to wrap up here. Basically, someone calls BS here, right? And everything starts to crash down. It's not just the hunts, though, that start to lose a bunch of money and panic. The financial world around them, and then also the larger economy. When this kind of thing happened in 2008, parallels, echoes, not exactly the same, but, in 2008, when complicated financial schemes started to unravel, the government stepped in, obviously. Does that happen in this story? Kind of what is the bailout mechanism?
Okay, so we got fact-checked on this one. Initially in our first draft, we said government bailout, and then it turns out it wasn't actually the government, it was a government-arranged bailout, so it was like private banks and investors decided to buy up the debt or whatever. But the fascinating thing about this story is it was one of the first times where regulators and also finance bros on Wall Street realized that all of the economies that were happening in America were tied together. Because the thing about the hunts was they were rich kids, right? They had a traditional stock portfolio. And so when the news came out that they couldn't pay their creditors, everyone on Wall Street was like, wait, they own our stock. Like, what, should we be getting out right now? And it started this panic because obviously all of these systems were suddenly thrown into relief, right? It's not just happening in Chicago. It's not just happening in New York. These people have so much money everywhere that it's all of us and we're all in free fall. So what do we do? And so the government steps in. And the other thing is there's an incredible congressional hearing where they maintain their innocence. They're we didn't try to corner the market. Mm-hmm. The Saudi royal family just denied that they ever invested in silver in the first place. The one prince who was in with them, which is, okay, yeah, sure, it never happened. Whatever, dude. I can't prove that in court of law.
What's so interesting about this story is that it's a unique story in the sense that there are these two brothers at the center of this who are so enormously wealthy that they're able to destabilize the entire American financial market. But in other ways, it is just the story of 2008. When you build your economy on a bubble of bad debt, that debt is going to come due at some point, and that's eventually what happens, that everyone was too over leveraged in this silver bubble, and once the bubble pops, it doesn't just affect the hunts, it affects every financial instrument because all of the financial instruments were tied together. And it's wild that it's just these two guys and a member of the Saudi royal family who are doing it. But it's a fascinating story.
But it's also crazy because it's in their attempt, as Jody said, to get one more billion, they lose $1 billion.
They go bankrupt.
Yeah, well, they're not. That's the other thing. They don't go bankrupt. They're still extremely wealthy. They just are relieved of a couple $1 billion, and they have to give out some of their properties as collateral. It's nothing really happened. They're still really. That family is still extremely wealthy. Also, their grandkids are doing actually cool stuff right now. One of them, I think, is a metal singer. Pretty sweet. But
different kind
that
of
money has not run out.
And people, NFL fans may recognize the last name Hunt as the Lamar Hunt owned some football teams. This is a very powerful tentacle-ish family. I think there were 15 kids in this family, so no surprise they spread out.
Ironically, Lamar was the most successful brother of the first family.
Yeah.
who kept his hands out of this, which I think
Yeah,
is
when NFL owner is like far and away the most ethical line of work that your family has found itself into, I think it says something.
It really, it really does. This family, they changed the structure of America. I think we can say that, right? Their money warped the country.
As final questions, as we wrap up, did this actually change policy or the way that the government thought about billionaires or regulating markets or anything like that, or even just in the larger consciousness, did it sort of change anything? Because obviously we're having those conversations now about what is the role of billionaires.
I think I think that's a really interesting question, because I mean, presumably yes, some laws were changed somewhere. The markets also, like the Chicago futures market and New York futures market, were they actually limited during the course of the saga. They limited how much silver any one person could own, and another factor that led to Silver Thursday was one of those clauses was the Hunts had to sell a certain amount of silver by this date, and it the day before Silver Thursday. Turns out that if your wealth is premised on silver and you have to sell some of it, oh man, maybe the House of Cards comes falling down. Anyway, yes, the answer is some stuff did change. But it's weird because we keep having financial crises. I think the larger lesson, and this is the other thing. It's our show is called Eclipsed. The concept is stories that in a sentence, stories you never knew, right? These are stories that have gotten overshadowed by time or another bigger event. They're stories that maybe you should know, but also and have maybe changed a bit of history, but they've fallen by the wayside. And I think this is sort of the nature of financial crises, right? The one that preceded it was the savings and loan crisis. The one that came after it was you could say anything in 2008. There's a tendency for these things to keep happening because somebody figures out hey, I think I can game the system this way, and it turns out you're playing with you're not playing with house money. You're playing with other people's lives, and it's a fascinating thing. So I think if we learned, I think yes, Silver Thursday changed stuff. If we also agree that yes, 2008 changed stuff. If we also agree that the COVID-19 pandemic, because that was I mean, actually, you know what? I take it back. COVID-19 different because our economy, I hear, is stronger than ever. Also, silver prices are going up. So
well, there we go. All right. Anything else we feel like?
Hold on. Let me fact check that last thing.
Well, silver prices peaked in 2011 recently, but now they're starting to creep back up, I think. But
okay, great. So we're in the clear there. All right.
Anything else we feel like we want to touch on?
To bring this around full circle, it is also the case that in conservative media today, one of the biggest advertisers are gold and silver.
Yeah.
That hard currency is a big part of the
gold.
conspiratorial right.
Yeah,
we love to see it, don't we?
Yeah.
And we didn't really get deep into the H.L. Hunt kind of conspiratorial mindset world. I mean, we've done episodes on the John Birch Society before, but yes, I mean, we will, and we've touched on H.L. Hunt a number of times. But that is, and especially in the first episode of this series, there's a really great sort of painting the picture of just what made H.L. Hunt tick, and then how it trickled down to his kids' neuroses.
He was a very, very paranoid guy, and he was afraid that the government regulators were going to come and take everything, and it did end up happening, but it was by their own hand. It was
right, that's interesting.
Oftentimes, that's what happens in your attempts to block something. You really open yourself up to get it all taken away.
It proves your own conspiracy.
Yeah.
Yes. All right. Well, Bijan Stephen, thank you so much for doing this. The series is called Silver Thursday. It's on Eclipsed, which is the new podcast, 4-part series all this month. But this has been really fascinating, and there's tons more in the series. So go check that out, listeners.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been wonderful.
Nicole Hemmer, thanks to you.
Thank you, Jody.
And Kellie Carter-Jackson, thanks to you.
My pleasure.
I don't have to spend a lot of money to enjoy life. I guess probably I doubt if I spend $1,000 a month, but on my own personal success. I don't know. I guess people are born one way or the other. They either like to be cautious with their money, or else they're inclined to want to be rather spendthrift. So maybe I lean in my personal affairs to being a little cautious. In my business, I suspect I'm on the overly aggressive side.
Support for This Day in Esoteric Political History comes from Odoo. What is Odoo? Well, Odoo is the only software your business will ever need. Featuring a suite of integrated business applications, Odoo connects your business operations together so you can get more done in less time. Odoo has apps for everything: CRM, accounting, sales, HR, inventory, marketing, manufacturing, you name it, Odoo's got it. To learn more, visit odoo.com/thisday. That's odoo.com/thisday.
Radiotopia. From